Hey guys, welcome to Thrive Bites, the official podcast of Dr. Colin Zhu, aka the Chef Doc. On every episode, I talk with health and wellness experts from all over the world, such as doctors, chefs, dietitians, coaches, and many more. And I sit down with them and have casual conversations about plant-based lifestyle, how to elevate our emotional resilience, and what it really means to thrive. And I bring all of this to you. So let's get to this week's episode. Okay, guys. Well, welcome to another episode of Thrive Bites. I'm your host, Colin Zhu, and thank you for listening on. Today, I have a amazing guest for you guys today. I am so stoked for her to be here. This is Meg Church. Say hi to everyone, Meg. For those of you who do not know who she is, you will. She is basically her main job is a coach for self-sabotage and relationships. But she has a plethora of other accolades. She has graduated from the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. She is also a health supportive culinary chef out of Natural Gourmet Institute. And she's also a yoga instructor, personal fitness trainer, and just most recently, a John Maxwell leadership speaker. Probably can go all day with all this, but they want to learn all about you. So my first question is, well, not really a question. I want to say thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
And I know we've been really, really dear friends for many years. Where are you calling from right now?
I am from Indianapolis, Indiana, and it's cold here.
Are you wearing like a parka right now?
No, I'm not that cool. Not yet.
Yeah, so obviously I know your story, and people who follow you, people who are, having really personal relationships obviously know who you are as well, and you've built up such a great community, which you're going to share. But for those of the audience who do not know who you are, I love taking my guests through point A to point B, just sharing their stories about what really makes them and how they came about on their journey and how they ended up, on this particular moment in their lives. So your journey is very, very colorful, so rich. And I just, want for you to kind of, color it for us and, just start off.
All right, I can do that. So as everyone probably says, their story is all over the place. It's lengthy. But I'm going to give just the bullet points. Basically, I was seeking perfection in all parts of my life. And I felt like if I had the perfect body, if I had perfect relationships, if I had perfect career, all of that, then my life was going to be perfect. And as we all know, there's no such thing as perfection. So I had to be the stubborn girl going through the decade-long journey of struggle. Like I was riding the struggle bus. I was on the hot mess express, and was really seeking healing because I had been in some relationships that weren't always the greatest, weren't always the type, that brings out the best in you. It actually brings out the stress, not the definition of thriving, as you would say. And was struggling with my purpose on this earth. I was struggling with body. I had a lot of different eating disorders and just body dysmorphia. And all of those things I learned were all highly integrated. Colin and I both went to school together in New York, and I was on my journey at that time. I was on my healing journey. I had called off a wedding a couple years, maybe a year or two prior, was trying to find balance with my body, healing. I felt like I couldn't keep living the way that I was, but didn't really know how to fix it. So I thought that going to culinary school would teach me even more, that I could perfect my eating that way and all the food stuff, with integrative nutrition the same way, with becoming a personal trainer, all the things. The more that I felt like I added to my resume, the better I thought I would get to seeking that like claimed perfection. And what I found was I had layers and layers of layers of self-sabotage that I was doing that I didn't know exactly why, and I felt like it was outside of my control. I was stuck. I had super low self-esteem. I had a lot of self-doubt, extremely high levels of anxiety. Had been through a lot of different rejection in my life, not from family, but just in different choices that I tried to go down, and career paths and people and just different things. And like I said, relationship struggles, um, body battles, all of that. Trying to please everybody else, but I wasn't truly pleasing myself, and trying to fulfill what I felt like I needed, because I really honestly didn't know. I was so stuck. If you've been in that spot where you're so stuck, you don't even know your next move. So I made the journey to go back to school and go to New York. So that is where I had to face a lot of my inner hot mess and get that all cleaned up. So I guess that's a starting point of my story.
Was New York the first? I know you're originally from Indiana. Was New York the first, I guess, city or state you've kind of, really ventured out before?
College was, because college, I went to IU in Bloomington, which is definitely a bigger campus, but New York, coming from a small town of 8,000 people to New York, was like a whole nother level. But I absolutely loved it. It was very eye-opening. So many amazing things happened while I was in New York. So I was very grateful once I got there and kind of got used to everything.
Right, right, right. Yeah, so one's journey could definitely be, in a way kind of mapped out in terms of, a lot of people like to analogize it to, a roller coaster ride and all this other stuff. And, I'm a big fan of the expression, you can't judge a book by its cover. And a lot
Mm-mm.
of people are just walking around and, all we see is the exterior and all we see is the facade. And even more so, in our virtual world that we, most of us live in now, the internet,
Mm-hmm.
social media, and it's all about facades. So
Mm-hmm.
it makes connection with other people and connection with yourself that much more challenging, because you just end up building, or not necessarily building layers on top, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to burying yourself, deeper and deeper and deeper, if you don't do the work that is needed to kind of declutter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Spring
Mm-hmm.
cleaning and bringing out all that stuff to the surface, and then once you get to the surface, to acknowledge it and then figure out what to do with it, and
Mm-hmm.
whether it's yourself or reaching out, that's it's got to start from somewhere, right?
Yep. Yep.
So, during this journey, can you give us a couple examples in terms of specific challenges that you faced coming up from this journey? I know you've dealt with family, different events in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously, you talk about relationships. So I'm sure there's relationships, specific relationship events that happen in your life as well, that kind of mold you in this direction of where you're going.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I am glad you asked that, because I had a couple people actually say something to me about how they couldn't tell me something at one point because I wouldn't get it. And I realized that I clearly haven't stated my story enough, because they had no idea some of the things that I had gone through. And just to give, I guess, everybody a little bit more insight on those struggles and on those challenges, I lost my brother. That was one of the first big ones for me. My little brother in a car train accident my freshman year in college, and it just totally rocked my world. My other brother was in the car at the same time, and he survived, and it just completely changed everything. And this was a time where I was still struggling big time with body and all of that. So that was a big initiator into the challenge world. It definitely forced me to grow in many ways. And then after college, I called a fully paid for wedding off. So that's where the whole relationship stuff started. So that story is always interesting. I learned a lot. Was it tough? Absolutely. Was it scary to tell your parents that you didn't think that you should do this when everything was paid for? Yep. But I learned so much about myself. And had I gone through with that, it wouldn't have ended well because I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know who Meg was. And so I started to experiment with what I wanted to do in life. And some of that was with people. Some of that was like learning more about myself through people and what I loved and didn't like. And with that came more challenges. So I was in some unhealthy relationships. I was in some amazing relationships. I was in some relationships where I felt stuck. I didn't feel like my best self. I also, while dealing with my own struggles of body image and eating disorders and everything, went through a phase where when I moved back from New York, I thought it was healed. I thought everything was good. And then I found out that my really close friend was dying of cancer, and it had happened immensely, happened very quickly. And I literally got to talk to her the day before she died. I mean, she was diagnosed within a month and died like within that month. And she too had struggled with eating disorders and things. So that really rocked my world. And right when I thought I had healed, I found myself in my car in a Meijer parking lot, like binging, which I hadn't done in a while. And that was a time where I really was crying out and like trying to surrender and asking God for help. And that led to a whole other ball game. I did start to not have issues in that realm. But what I learned was I still had such high levels of self-doubt and low self-esteem that I had worked through, but I was coming face to face with. And it was showing up in more relationship work. It was showing up in my business. It was showing up in things that I tried, and it just wasn't getting better at the level I was expecting. And then right when I started to feel like I was getting somewhere with my work and stuff, I was cheated on, like big time. Like, if you guys have ever dealt with that, it's not fun. And to come to grips with that. And I had learned through that experience that all the work that I had put in for myself actually worked, because I didn't go back to some of the self-sabotaging behaviors that I had done before, but I could actually rationalize with myself and not the hot mess expression of myself and get through the situation and learn that it wasn't my fault, but that hurt people hurt other people. And that, if you guys have ever been through an experience like that, that is one of the biggest things I can tell you to take away. Like, it's not always you. There are things that maybe you need to work on too, but hurt people hurt other people. And then shortly after that, maybe a little bit longer after that, I lost my dad unexpectedly, and that completely changed everything. And that's when I learned I needed to do something outside of business to help get me out of what could be this big self-sabotage hole. And that's one of the biggest things I feel like I can tell people is, like, if you know that you're struggling, sometimes you don't need to listen to what everybody else is telling you. You need to dig deep and figure out what you need. And sometimes what you need may look like it's taking you 5,000 steps backwards, but really it's going to teach you so much more about yourself and what you truly need. And for me, it was taking on another job and doing something that I loved, even though it wasn't my forever thing. And through that, I met so many amazing connections. I got to connect with myself again and work through it versus go down this dark hole. So that's sometimes something that I think that people really could gain from that. Like, when you're in the struggle bus, when you're like riding it and you feel like you're never going to get off, sometimes doing something that you know you're already good at is a great way to get you through the struggle.
Yeah, so I definitely want to acknowledge, and sympathize. I think as human beings, we have our own versions of how we deal with death and how we deal with passing and how we deal with, another loved one moving on. And everyone's different, right? So, but I think as hard as it is to be able to lose two family members and, what it sounds like a really good friend, a really good dear friend, that could cripple anyone, you know what I'm saying? And I know personally that you come from a very strong family household and you have a lot of great, friendships, to rely on. And I can only imagine other people listening in, who might not have that, and has dealt with a lot of challenges and trauma in their lives as well. And I also like the fact that, you've turned those experiences and channel it into something where it could benefit others. So definitely, kudos to you. So there's obviously so many different topics we can talk about. In terms of let's target self-sabotage, since that is one of your main cruxes, one of your main shticks that you love to talk about. What is it about self-sabotage nowadays for people? And I don't know. I don't think I want to generalize in terms of males and females, and I think everyone has their own unique journey with it, but it's a different thought processes we go through. It's a different self-limiting beliefs that we go through. What is it about self-sabotage that limits people nowadays?
Well, so I define self-sabotage first. I think it's good to get clear on what exactly it is, but I define self-sabotage as what is standing between where you are now and where you want to be. Like, what is preventing you from getting to that success or whatever that definition of success is? What's standing in the way is your self-sabotage. And most of the time, you know what it is. That's the thing. That's where the whole self part comes in. What we've identified are the 7 big self-sabotaging behaviors that really prevent people from getting to their level of success that they need to work through are stuck, self-doubt, anxiety, rejection, body battles, people pleasing, and then what I call relation shit. So those are the things that usually it's one of those. And like, for example, if you're dealing with comparison or envy or jealousy, that can be lumped into self-doubt. That could be lumped into anxiety, however you're experiencing it. So many different things can be lumped in one of those 7 generalizations. And until you work on those, it's going to be like what you were saying earlier. It's almost like blocking you from having what you want. And maybe that's a successful relationship. Maybe that's a successful career. Maybe that's from having a successful relationship with yourself. When you have all those things that are blocking you, it's hard for you to see who you are. And then for that to be like a magnet and attract someone else that sees the same thing. So I definitely, those things need to be looked at and not done out of shame, but basically just like look at it and have the mentality of like, okay, all I need to do is just check it out, and I need to accept what I see. I don't need to judge myself. I don't need to have a lot of shame. This is our starting point. And by me acknowledging this, it doesn't mean I'm going to be stuck here forever. Because I used to think that. I thought, if I look there, I'm going to be stuck forever. And that's not the way it is. It's just like a starting point. And I use this a lot. I just thought of this. I use this a lot. In order to reach success, and like I said, whatever you define that is, you have to go through the sucky phase. There is no success without the suck. Like, you have to suck first. And so when you can see it as a blooper phase, as a free reign to make as many mistakes as possible, then you take the pressure, you take the anxiety inducing nerves out of the equation, you take the fear out of the equation, because you're allowed to just try.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that might help a little bit.
Yeah. So in terms of the categories that you've came up with, was that something that you see over and over through different types of clients and people over your experience, or is it also something that you personally have gone through all 7 as well?
Oh, I've definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, I've gone through all 7 of these, and they all are very much interlinked too. So if you can't quite figure out which one is your main one, it's probably because they're all holistic. They all kind of affect each other. But I have found this with groups that we've ran. I've found this with coaching. I found it in conversation. I've used it in my life. I love studying people. So that's kind of what we've found.
Me too.
Yes, we love people.
Yes. Hey guys, we're going to be taking a short break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thrive Bites. Let's get back to the interview. Yeah, so it's very interesting. And, from there, do you take them on a pathway to, is it an individual pathway that, you start coaching them on, or, is it, you create like a structure program for them, or, how do you go about once they are able to, recognize it? Because the thing is that, we're not taught this, right? And, I just had this conversation with a previous guest on the show, about, self-care and, well-being for yourself. Right. And, I think it's more talked about now because we have the vehicle of social media to be able to relay things really quickly. And, our world is very chaotic, sometimes, most of the time, if not all of it, is really unnecessary. And in my opinion, if you look at a lot of the spiritual practices of the world, pretty much most of them, if not all of them, would need to kind of start from rectifying and having self-resolve, for oneself, right? And then that emanates, to everything, to the relationships you touch, to the people you connect to, just everything, right? So the question is that, when someone comes to you, do you take them on an individual journey to be able to help them along their way, or is it, how do you go about it, is the question?
So it kind of depends on where they're at. Like, I don't believe in a cookie cutter model at all. I feel like so many coaches and speakers and doctors, this too, like chefs, everything, they try to have a cookie cutter approach when we're all made different on purpose. And so you have to take the person where they're at and figure out what they need and where they're going. And if you don't know those things, it's going to be a lot harder to help. So it does take a vulnerability to be able to share your struggles and say, hey, like, I am like majorly struggling here, or this is my background. This is where I want to go. I need to get out of my own way. That's a big thing, is how to help people get out of their own way. But it's based off of their needs, but also what they have time for. Like, do they need a do it yourself approach? Do they need some TLC with coaching? Do they need just to listen to things on their own? It's completely up to what they personally need. Sometimes it's just a lot of self-help books. It's recommendations that way, which I have that on the site. Sometimes it's a morning routine, which we have a program for that too called Soul SOS, which is like daily motivation in the morning. Sometimes it's actual one-on-one coaching. Sometimes it's an online course. It's like a 6 weeks thing that has group coaching calls with it too. It really just depends on where they're at and like where they need the most help, and then giving them the tools in that part of their life, because it's really hard if someone has literally no time and it's hard for them to make calls, or it's hard for any of that. Like, then we got to work with what they have. If they only have a car ride to get some self-help, we need to do some audio type stuff. We need to have them listening to some podcasts. We need to have them, just doing those kind of things. You can get help no matter what your schedule is. It just depends on what resources you have available, time, money, your needs, that kind of thing. So.
Right. And obviously, we live in a very, very busy and distractive world. And I would argue that working on things like this is probably, needs to take priority. I say this with other people where it doesn't matter if you're eating the best diet or best high quality
Right.
foods, or if you're moving, very well, moving every single day, things like that. It's really about having that mindset and having that mindset where you keep on moving despite what you've been through, because I recognize what I've been through doesn't really define my current moment or the future, but has made me grow and evolve into the person that I am today. Right. But in my opinion, I think, we just live in a very busy and distractive, world. I like to talk about, your other tools and your toolbox, or,
Mm-hmm.
your other hats that you've worn. Because in a way, you can take a little bit from each to be able to integrate to what you're doing, which, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I feel like that's what you do as well.
Mm-hmm.
But having been through a yoga, being a yoga teacher, what is it about our busy and distractive lifestyle that, contributes to where we are at right now?
Yeah, it's crazy because yoga, for example, taught me it was so much more than the poses. It was me surrendering and having time to ground and to be taught and to be loved on in a moving type setting and to accept what came up because it becomes a moving meditation. You're faced with different crazy poses and challenges and different things too. But for me, it was so much more about the heart language that I received.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that I had that too. And that's something that I love to teach. I very rarely teach yoga now. I teach it more the soul work. I teach, like I love anything that kind of hugs your heart. And that was something I learned from that. Even with integrative nutrition, as you were saying, we learned that it's not just the food, it's your relationships. It's the things that you're passionate about. It's all these different things that wrap around and integrate together that affects your digestion. It affects your relationships, your food, all these things. So like Colin was saying earlier, you can work out till you're blue in the face. You can eat all the kale in the world, but if you have a terrible relationship with yourself, it's going to affect those things too. And so truly it came down to figuring out what those self-sabotaging behaviors were. Like for me, I had high anxiety, and yoga helped me learn how to navigate through that with meditation and through slower movement, and really got me into reading a lot of different works first thing in the morning and having that grounded soul time and that morning routine first thing in the morning was a game changer for me. And that's something I would highly recommend for people too, is like get to know, like we spend so much time getting to know our partners, our friends, our family members, but how often do you actually have the time to get to know who you are and how you are uniquely made and what makes you thrive on a daily basis? And when you have that time first thing in the morning, it's going to set the rest of your day based off of that first bit in the morning. So if you wake up stressed out, you better watch out because your day might end up being stressed out. If you wake up more grounded and you have that time to like pour into yourself first, then you can go out and you can help other people so much better. And you got to make sure that your tank's full so you can help fill other people's tanks too. You can't be given from an empty tank or an empty cup, whichever you want to think of.
Yeah, definitely. It's countless times whenever I wake up, depending on that mood, on, how my day is going to start. So, always, to me, you were talking about the topic of perfectionism, right? It's not about being perfect, which a lot of what society portrays out there, right? That we have this unsatiable need to be perfect. And it's very common and cliche that no one's perfect. And to me, it's like, what is that at the end of the day, right? Like, what is perfect, mean, right? And what does it do? You know what I'm saying? Like, once you're perfect, then what?
Like, here's a cookie. You're perfect. Here's a trophy. You want a medal? All right.
Yeah, exactly. And is it, you want love from all your peers? If you want love from all your fans, like what is that at the end of the day? I don't think we talk about that, because once we talk about that, then we can break it down into how fragile of a concept that is. You know what I'm saying? That it's not a real thing, you know what I'm saying? It's like everyone is made differently on this earth, and, we're going to produce and express ourselves differently. So what is perfectionism at the end of the day? But my point is that it's really about progress, right? Waking up, doing things, accomplishing things, improving yourself before yesterday, right? And every little bit counts. I tell my patients all the time, just step by step. It's like progress. I just want the progress. And Tony Robbins says it. I'm going to paraphrase it. He says that the secret of happiness is progress. Is understanding and seeing all the different evolutions of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, that's important to convey.
Well, and that's what but just to pause real fast, that's what, like in one of the things that we teach, that's what we say every day. It's not about perfection. This is literally what we say. It's about getting 1% better every day.
Mhm.
And that's truly what it is. Like even some days with part of my past, like I've told some of my people this, like even if getting out of bed is progress that day, give yourself a pat on the back, because when you've been beat down and just like you feel like you've got nothing left in you, that is a victory. And I don't think sometimes we give ourselves enough credit when we feel like, oh my gosh, why is this stuff happening to me? And you're in such a dark phase that literally peeling yourself out of bed is a victory some days.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a thing that people don't want to talk about, but it's the truth. When you've been through death, when you've been through a lot of betrayal and rejection and different things in your life, that's a victory.
Yeah.
You just got to build upon it. You can't stay there. You can't every day.
Yeah.
Okay, how are we going to get out of bed today? All right, let's put some clothes on tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I have a lot of patients that fight depression. It's like, they don't have any
Mm-hmm.
appetite to eat. If you're able to get a bite in or 2 bites in, like
Yep.
that's progress. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Or someone starting a physical fitness, regimen. Everyone's going to the gym. I don't care about that. I just want you to walk. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Walk, in your apartment. Walk, down the block. Just go down
Mm-hmm.
the stairs. Anything, just start somewhere, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And feel accomplished that you have been able to make that first step or next few steps. Because guess what? If you compare that to yesterday, that's more than what you did yesterday, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that's the progress that we're talking about, and don't, just try not to seek external rewards that everyone is, obsessed about. So,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of relationships, let's go back to relationships a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious on, the wedding and why was it, called up? And we don't have to go that deep or technical or anything if you don't want to, but
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like, you've mentioned before that it kind of sets up, that ride of relationships that you personally went through. And going
Mm-hmm.
from that, um, how are people able to, kind of look at their past relationships differently so their future relationships are not as affected?
So, something that I have found that was really helpful, because yes, I did call off a fully paid for wedding 2 months prior. And that was just like a whole nother level. Like I said, a lot of it, I didn't know who I was. I was making mistakes. I was seeking my independence, and I'm starting to feel what that feels like, and just kind of lost track of wanting to get married, and which was a good thing, because like I said, I didn't know what I wanted to do in my life, and there's a whole other story with all of that. But on that whole decade of dating and the roller coasters, I think it's really important, if you've been there and you feel like you're going through this boot camp of like, oh my gosh, when is this going to end? When am I going to find my person? To go back and look at your evolution of relationships. Start looking at when you started struggling or when things kind of went chaotic, and literally do a timeline of your relationships. See the people that you were dating, see the things that you liked, see the things that you wish, like, oh my goodness, why did I have to go through that? What were the qualities and things that you learned in each of the different relationships up until where you are now? And I think sometimes we don't want to acknowledge how much experience teaches us, and how much you learn along the way, and how much clearer you get as you go through those experiences, because no one has it all figured out in the relationship world. There's people that dive quickly into relationships, and yeah, they might be happy, but a lot of them are not. And they're, again, hiding behind the social media world or filtering their life and just showing you the highlight reels. But if you really, really, really want something that's going to be a thriving relationship, you need to know who you are first. They say it all the time. You need to know where you hold yourself back and how to get out of your own way there. And then you also need to know exactly the type of person that you want to attract. Like, and a lot of times you learn what you want to track based off of what you never want to go through again.
Mm-hmm.
So when you know what your non-negotiables are, when you see someone else have things that like, oh, that's not what I want to do, that it reminds me of such and such, then you know that's not the route you want to go. Like, you guys can be friends or whatever, but maybe that's just not your person. So getting clear on that, I would say there's a few tools that have been really helpful for me. One is to know your love language. So The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman's a great book.
Mm-hmm.
Colin, do you remember my mom made me read that, like, in New York, and I was like, rolled my eyes. Yeah, and I was like, oh,
You know
my
what?
God.
I didn't discover that book until a lot later.
Yeah, it's
But
just
it's like, yeah. What was your reaction when your mom's?
when I first picked it up in New York, I was like, oh, this is just not for me. And then later I'm like, oh my gosh, this is gold. This is so good. And I talk about it to everyone. I'm like, what's your love language? How do you love? What were your past relationship love languages? So, like, once you learn that, and it's very simple, then you can go back and see what your ex's love languages were, and then move on from there and see what yours is. And if you are in a committed relationship now, like, the love languages really makes it even clearer on how to love your partner more and how they can love you more. So it's really just fun. It's just like, it's like a great eye-opening thing. Another thing, I think you and I had talked about this, is, this is the way I pronounce it. It's kind of a strange name, but it's the Enneagram or Enneagram, whichever way you want to pronounce it. I think it's a personality test that is just amazing. It goes on years and years and years ago. It's Christian based, and it basically, it just is so eye-opening. It's so spot on. For all of you that do the Enneagram, I'm a 3, so you can go study that. I'm trying to think, Colin, what you are. I don't know. I'll have to, because you're like everybody's a mix of different ones, but it's so eye-opening. And it's neat because it shows you what you are when you get stressed, and what you are when you are like more in a calm, like, safe space too. And then you have wings to it. It's just, like, amazing. I have a couple books on the website that are with that, so that's really cool. Just anything that you can study yourself and learn more, like, those give me the aha moments, and I will be like, oh my gosh, that's why this part didn't work. It's like putting little puzzle pieces back together to get you to where you want to be. As far as the whole roller coaster relationship type stuff, I know you and I've talked a lot about this too. When you get clear, it all makes sense. When you can get through some of the past and not look at it as mistakes, but as learning lessons that helped grow you, kind of like going through a boot camp, you appreciate the strength, but you may not appreciate the stress and the sweat that you had to go through during the time, but you like the rewards of it. And so I think to think of it in that way, of how did that relationship strengthen you? And how did it get you a little bit closer to yourself? Or did it take you away from yourself and you have to get back to yourself in order to move forward? I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, I feel like with every relationship, it's almost like it's interesting because I grew up as a first generation, Chinese American, born to immigrant parents. And I mentioned this, I shared my story a couple of times in different episodes, but and you already know, and the dating culture is different during my parents' generation. My mom and dad, they just dated, and wasn't really true dating because they lived in poor environments, and it wasn't like how we date in America, and dating culture wasn't as prevalent and casual and all this other stuff, and so basically, everyone is a reflection of you, depending on how much you date and who you end up dating, right? And what you learn is that everyone's a reflection of you, right? And you will have different phases, through these different relationships. But my point is, it's really about it. It took me some time to figure this out, that it's really the relationship that you have with yourself.
Absolutely.
Not in terms of loving relationships, but also in terms of working relationships, business relationships, family relationships. If we do not get clear on what kind of relationship we have for ourselves and how do we define that and what we want to set up for ourselves, we're just going to be all over the place, right? And so, I talk about my folks because, I didn't have a a perfect, role model to be able to, model myself. And so for me, I had to go through ups and downs, personally speaking as well. And what I've learned over time is, man, I do this, or I've become this, or I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize I did something like this,
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I've also taken a lot of years and worked on myself and looked at myself in the mirror and had to face harsh realities of, who I've become,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak, at
Mm-hmm.
different moments. I mean, I did that with traveling, and just kind of journeying, through, life, as it is.
Mm-hmm.
So. Hey guys, we're going to be taking a short break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thrive Bites. Let's get back to the interview.
Well, there's I don't know if you've seen this or whatever, but I read this recently and I was like, yes, this is so true. And it's something I don't think that women always think about, and I don't think that men always think about it to the level that we do. But they said the three primary things that men need for relationships is, the first one they need is respect. The second one that they need is recreational support, like whatever it is that it doesn't necessarily have to be like a sport or anything, but something that you like to do, you want to have support around it. And then the third one is sex for men. For women, the first one is love. So the men's was respect, women's is love. The second one was conversation. And then the third one was affection. And of course, like I think it could be a mix and it could be different, but I think when women realize that respect is needed by a man, and that love is needed for women as one of their primary, things just happen a little bit differently. You can see it in a different way. And it's kind of like with learning your love language. The things that fulfill you may not necessarily fulfill your partner. So it's learning those little differences that are huge differences and be able to speak to those without losing yourself, that you're going to notice your relationships start to thrive, because they're like little tricks. You're like, oh, wow, like that's what a guy needs. They don't need this like me. Okay.
Yeah. And I also think that it requires time, and it requires patience, and it
Yep.
requires constantly putting yourself in the other person's shoes to be
Yes.
able to see where they're coming from. I do agree that men and women operate differently, because like growing up, I always, I see these novel covers, or men are from Mars and women from Venus.
Right.
I mean, not only genetically and all kinds of other ways, but we are built differently, and so it's not surprising that to be able to give and receive love are different as well. But it does take time and patience and putting yourself in the other shoes, because I mean, it's like cooking a good meal. Both of you and I, we've been in the kitchen together, and all this other stuff. It takes time to prepare a good meal. It takes time to, really, really cultivate a relationship, especially with yourself. You know what I'm saying? And, God knows, at least for my family, it's taking me and my sister, at least for me, like, a very long time to be able to reach the point that I'm at, to have total utmost optimism, respect, and love, like just unconditionally for my family, and just for people in general, and but it took time. It took challenges. It took obstacles to be able to go through all that.
Do you know what it reminds me of? In culinary school, remember when we had to make the soups? Do you remember like the soup week? And we had to extract all the goodness from the celery, the carrots, and the onion. And if you didn't extract it long enough, it was going to affect the flavor of your soup. And Chef Jay checked us. I don't know if he checked you or not, but you got to extract the goodness. You got to extract all that you can, and you have to be patient. And it may take just a little bit longer, but if you spend that time, that extra time, it's going to drastically change the outcome of your dish or your relationship.
Definitely, definitely. And I think the reason why I bring this up is because we live in a fast-paced world. We live in a, quote unquote, busy and distractful, world. And we need to like everything can't happen in an instant. It
Right.
needs that time. It needs to marinate. It needs to,
Mm-hmm.
I love how we're just coming up with cooking analogies.
Now I'm getting hungry.
But yeah, it needs to work its magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, Sock, this has been great. And for those of you who don't know, I actually don't call Meg or Megan or this lovely, beautiful individual that I'm speaking to by her first name. I
Nope.
actually call her Sock, and the reason why I call this is a little bit behind the scenes, but I call her Sock because she reminds me of the philosopher Socrates, and we were talking about this is at our time in New York about it was around that book, The Peaceful Warrior,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
it was really about that movie. And one of the characters' name that was given by the protagonist or the main character was Sock, or short for Socrates. And I just remember this girl, this woman, all she does is just spit out like quotes and proverbs and sayings and words for wisdom. I'm like, where did you come from? Who speaks like this? You're definitely not from the Northeast. Like, I don't know what's going on.
That's
So,
so
but I call
funny.
her Sock, and that's how I've always known her. And I know she has a thriving, bustling community behind her, and it's just going to get even bigger. And that's just my relationship with her. So, um, Sock, this has been great. I think we can pretty much go forever. But
Yeah.
I want to be able to leave it here, and who knows, we might come back later to revisit some of these topics. But one of my favorite questions to close out with my guests is, how do you thrive yourself? And it's a question that I love asking because I don't like watching people, even though it's their shtick, right? I don't like
Mm-hmm.
watching people just going through the day to day, what I call, I wrote this in my book, but what I call the default life, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I love, when people get up in the morning, the reason why, right? Finding your why, what fuels their fire, what, flame, has that source, that juice for their passion, why they do the things that they do. So what are other things, obviously we've heard a lot of obstacles and challenges that brought you to this point, but what are some other things that has helped you thrive yourself?
One of my biggest values, one of my biggest things that if I don't have this, I don't have anything, and I'll basically ruin anything that I get my hands on, is peace. Peace and freedom, like freedom, peace of mind, however you want to say it. If I don't have that, then everything else is it's not going to be as rich. And so that's really important for me. And basically it's getting out of your own way. Like I said, with self-sabotage. I'm big on, as I say, slay self-sabotage and rock your relationships. That includes yourself, that includes anyone you interact with. And when you have that peace of mind and that freedom to be your authentic self, no matter what that looks like, without self-judgment and without wishing that you were someone else, you're going to be able to do that. You're going to be able to connect with people on such a deeper level. And you're going to have thriving relationships, whether it's in the workplace, your significant other, clients, people you interact with at the cash register. Heck, what we were talking about, like on Amazon, like if you have to get on their customer service, something. It's your life is just going to be so much more rich, and I think that's something that's very, 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 very important to me, is to have that peace of mind and freedom to be
Mhm.
myself.
Awesome. Awesome. And what is one message? We've talked, a lot about self-sabotage in relationships. What is one message that you want to impart to those who are currently struggling or who have, not really sure where to go or how to start? Like, what is one thing you would convey to them that's currently on, you say what is it? What bus?
Struggle bus.
Struggle bus.
If
Yeah.
you are on the struggle bus going nowhere fast, it is okay. There is a purpose for it. Again, it's about getting 1% better. It's not about being perfect. It's about studying yourself. It's about studying your self-sabotage without shame, without having to fix everything all at once, and just checking it out, like looking at yourself and seeing where you're at, and then trying to figure out more of where you want to go. It's not, we complicate it way too much. And sometimes that means putting blinders on and not checking out everybody else's stuff on social media, and taking a little hiatus away from some friends that suck the life out of you, or just saying no more, and getting to know who you are without always having to have stuff around you all the time, because you're going to show up more fully, and just really plugging into some type of positivity every single day, whether it's your faith, whether it's some kind of self-help, whether it's good relationships, something that brings the inspiration out of you so that you aren't feeling so stuck and feeling like you're going to be on the struggle bus forever, because you won't. It eventually will not be that bad, and you can think of it as like the boot camp that finally you get the strength from.
Awesome. So for those of the audience members that want to learn more about you or want to reach out and learn more about your programs, where can they find you?
So many places. A couple of them, definitely check out the website. So megchurch.com. We also run a really fun Facebook group called Self Sabotage Slayers, and we would love to have you there. And then, like, on the website, you'll see different opportunities to work with me. So we have more of a DIY version. So it's Soul SOS. There's information on there, which is really fun. I have a new relationship course coming out. I have another way to coach is basically working on yourself, your body, your relationship with food, and how that's affecting your relationships, called Bulletproof You. And yeah, all my information and messaging is basically to help you get out of your own way.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
And slay self-sabotage.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Definitely check her workout. Sock, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
It was so fun.
You are a light for this world, and I'm so glad that we have crossed paths and, been able to do this and finally get an episode in. And
Absolutely.
I know that your audience members will benefit. So, thank you so much.
Absolutely. I can't wait to share all this with them.
Guys, thank you so much for listening on to the show. If you like this episode, please like, follow, and subscribe, and we will see you on the next one. Hey guys, that was another episode of Thribites. If you like that episode, please subscribe and follow for new episodes. And don't forget to rate us on Apple Podcasts.